Okay. Hello, everyone. The title of this episode is Drawn Designs of a Universe Pre-Thought, and I want to comment on something that I find. Um, I don't know. I don't feel many people in history have given too much commentary on it, but it is a concept of what was before emptiness. And so what that means is if time is a sort of linear line, and we are saying something came from nothing, as the kind of secular view holds, this something that came from nothing, it means that the beginning of time was void. So pretty much you can say the philosophies of reality is a dance between emptiness and the content within that emptiness. We are creatures on the content of a content in a vast emptiness, of course. So to wonder about what was there before emptiness is kind of wondering about the beginning of time and the beginning of all sorts of meaning. It's kind of like reverse engineering from what is in the space to a realization what is even viewing the space has nothing to do with the space. So you see, it's kind of like you can say the common man was the materialist, the uncommon man was a person who was like, okay, maybe this mind is standing somewhere that the body isn't. And so what I mean by that is like it's like there's an awareness to what is the form in the moment. Every being, I tell you, this is your objective self. And then there is an awareness to that which is aware of the form, which tends to have in the back, it's kind of, at least the way I experience it, is that it's as if my mind is a room, is a hidden room. So what I'm trying to suggest is that when we go back to the source of time, which appears to us as a void where the universe, like an egg, kind of hatched, this doesn't mean that emptiness is emptiness. So what I mean by that is when we wonder about true emptiness, we come to the way we have contained it. That means in modern times we see space as empty space. We're like, yo, we're in a vacuum. But back in the day, they saw space as an element of the periodic table. So it's as if like treating space as if it's water. It's a sort of like it's the water if we were fish. Space. And so to even wonder about the intelligence of space could be of a totally different dimensional fabric. So what does that mean? That means what appears to a 2D dimension as emptiness is actually, you can say, is like, it's kind of like a veil. Emptiness is a veil between different realities. It's like we create borders between nations. We require emptiness between dimensions. Without even the consideration of emptiness, we can't really tell a story, can we? We require that silence. It's as if every time I have spoken, I have noticed that before I have spoken, the silence of the moment has spoken. The silence of the moment wants nothing from the moment, it is witnessing it. You know, the biggest transformation I found that was, or let me say it like this, one of the most life changing moments that I experienced in this lifetime was the moment that it was like a subtle loosening of my grip on reality, as if like imagine you've grabbed reality's collar and pushed reality against the wall, and you're like, you know give my money. So that kind of like intensity, I remember it's like pretty much you can say wisdom is about how intensely you're gripping something that is simple. It's like you choose whether the moment becomes complex. You know, we are creatures that no longer need to just be concerned about our objective constitution, how there's an objective self and it has a relationship with an objective environment. But now we have to be even conscious that there's a subjective self and there's a relationship of the viewer with the objective self with the subjective self. That means there are certain moments in this life where I call it like the kind of solid, liquid, gas state of a substance, but it is for the mind, you know? In a solid state of mind, playfully speaking, the person is identifying with what changes the slowest. It's like material. It's like 100% materialism, 50% materialism, immaterialism, and in some sense 100% immaterialism. Now, what does that mean? Immaterialism, materialism. That means we are when we are wondering about where we are standing, it is appearing to us as rather than something that the known is moving the unknown. It is the unknown moving the known. We have to even consider in the evolutionary scheme. I found something so fascinating that when human beings left the food chain, left the animal food chain, when we weren't being chased by tigers, we came to civilization and we started creating our own environment. That means man did not first become a god of himself. He became a god of his environment. His free will first attempted to organize the environment and then came to the self. It's kind of like saying when a child is born, it hasn't been indoctrinated into language, it hasn't been conditioned, it has no sense of an individuality, one can say even, aside from the body sense. I say the first duality that comes to children is temperature. you know that's good coffee. Anyways, not to go too off on a tangent. What I'm kind of saying is that I'm looking at reality. I see it's a game. It's an oscillation of attention between the known and the unknown. The known appears to me as the manifest material component. The unknown appears as the dynamic kind of, not per se purely materialistic kind of component. So what I mean by that is that when I look in when my eyes open in the morning. Sure, the idea comes, okay, I remember who I am, I remember where I am, I look around, but when I also have a comfort with myself to be unknown. That means it took me a while to learn that the unknown self doesn't constantly need to be filled up. That gap of the unknown self doesn't need to be filled up with language. It took me a while. It took me a while to realize that the biggest problem of my life was the story I was telling myself and how I was seeing myself a character in a world different than the world that was in front of my eyes. So what that means is somebody could their eyes could be open, but they could not be looking at the thing. It's kind of like, listening. When somebody is talking to you, but you're thinking about what you're going to do on Sunday. And so you're listening to them, your head is nodding, but it's as if to you only sound is appearing. So this is the cool thing about even listening, that if you don't put an effort to translate, to extract meaning from the voice of another, it would just be sound to you, you know? Pretty much, I'm saying before emptiness, what was there, and I see the language threshold. This is a concept I've created to suggest that we are seeing experience be present in a non dual way, and non dual could imply infinite or void. Okay? Dual means two dimensions. That means it's so important to realize that the sun's been hitting the surface of the earth in a kind of on and off switch kind of way. So a lot of our psychology, our biology is based on that. I mean, when you look at the symmetry of the body, when you look at the duality of the body, when you look at the function of the heartbeat, this is a strange thing, but if we were to take symmetry into consideration, you know, there is some mysterious things occurring even in the human body, which I've wondered why. You know, that it's like why do we have kind of two lungs, but we don't have two hearts as a human being? Do you know? I thought about that. I thought about like what is it with the kind of relationship of singular dimensions? And then it only appeared to me in a very strange way. What if what is happening on Earth, it was never a singular dimension? What if the world we are standing in is multiple rooms, and our what we have behind our eyes, in some sense in our skulls, called the brain, is some unique sort of antenna? It's an antenna that not just gives out signals but receives signals. You know, and so really, because language was a technology sparked, was discovered like fire, it's another way of saying sparked like fire. This kind of technology is something that one must have attention to the external. The best recommendation I kind of give people is that external survival, you can handle it geometrically. And some people may be like, what do you mean? What do you mean you handle external life geometrically? I mean, prior to allowing emotions to enter the moment, you observe the design of phenomena. This is called the designer's vision. You know, this is why I say Buckminster Fuller was one of the greatest designers, not just because of what he did. I mean, what he did, yeah, it was his response in the moment he was alive. You know, true philosophers, they don't. The moment they see the temporary philosopher, they also see the eternal philosopher. So it's kind of like the eternal self of every human being, which is the unknown presence and potential of their mind, you have to honor. So what does that mean? That means it's like certain values, I call them the pillars of civilization, and I feel kind of happy to find these values quick. You know, because what I'm realizing is that the whole civilization is moving into a transformation of first an individual relationship where evolution's like, whoa, is evolution turning matter into mind? Is evolution how an object became a subject to itself? And so when we look at that, you know, it's as if there will come a time where, just as there was a metamorphosis, you can say, of the transition of intelligence of a creature that was living with its environment. Do you know that nature is the imagination of animals? That means animals, their environment is a part of their thinking. Human beings who have left nature and built their own environment now have to become responsible. And look at the hilarious dynamic. When we were creatures in nature, we were instantly in sync with our environment, our ecosystem, and ourself were singular. So that means in nature, there is no ego, there's no identity. You know, when I say that, I'm speaking about it in a certain context. Anyways, it doesn't mean the animal doesn't know itself. I'm just saying there's no subjective identity in the way that we project, you know? So what I'm saying is we are like creatures that were part of the environment. Our intelligence was active. You know why a lot of the percentage of the brain is not used? That means like a lot of human activities that a person does, what they say, like a person, of course this was an article, it was a theorization. I think there's no exact way to calculate this, but it's kind of like saying human beings are using 12% of their brain, you know? And it's like, I guess they're like, what they saw was like they saw brain scans and they saw it's like mainly activities occurring in the frontal lobe. Now, all the other parts of the brain that are inactive since my childhood, I was 11. I was 11 when I heard this kind of article saying that 12% of, what do you call it? The brain is only being used, right? And I was like, what? I was like freaking out as a kid. I'm like, people are not using their whole brains. This is ridiculous, you know? To be honest, I wasn't that startled. I was more fascinated by the mystery of it. So I eventually, my mind projected an answer. And the answer was that greater percentage of the brain was not meant to be used by the archetypal identity. That means we are creatures that appear currently as individually conscious, but when you look at the process of history, the evolution, even where we're heading, Isn't it strange? It's as if we were just the world, then we became man, then man looked at his world and realized consciously he is the world. The whole point of us leaving the environment was to become conscious that we are the environment. You see, so it's more like saying this earth is a plane of existence for the crystallization of vision. And vision is not something to be that can be contained, right? Sight can be contained. Sight has to do with the scene, but vision doesn't necessarily mean you're acknowledging only what you know. There's so many things right now, so many secrets of the world that every day I walk in, I know they're standing there. I know they're there. I know this world has treasures, but it is how much the species cares. It is honestly the greatest metaphysical question. Where did emptiness come from? I feel like I'm kind of losing my trail of thought a bit. Run up the mountain, run up the mountain. All right, here. I think this is how far I climbed. Pretty much oscillation between it's like this: unconscious collective phenomena, individual conscious phenomena. Then we're going to go into collective conscious phenomena. Then this is going to be the interesting thing, the ultimate individual unconscious. So this is going to be a very unique thing, but we as human beings have been assuming that personality is temporary. That means how you're standing now is temporary to the self. If the limits of the self are the physical body, of course, if I think I'm just this body, I am this body. But if I feel that my mind is a spherical awareness, a sort of receiver of the sensory data of this universal sector, that receiver is ultimately a relationship between matter and space. So the human beings are conscious, it means 50% of the soul is hidden in space, is space. That means it's like just like attention embodies matter, it's like the space of your awareness. So think of it this way: if we say the human being is simply equate, like we put an equal sign, and human existence is equal to self-awareness, and then we just zoom in on the word self and awareness, and we say, okay, well, the objective realm is the self, and in some sense the physical self, and the subjective realm is the awareness, how we are aware we are this object. It's not just that we are this object, we are aware we are it, right? And when you go look at ancient books like the Upanishads, as it was written in Sanskrit, which was the language of the bright beings, in the Upanishad they say the seer of the it's kind of like that which sees, its seeing is unseen. Yeah, the thing is, this is why human nature and personality really helps. So it's kind of like, think of it this way. Let's get rid of this idea of thinking that the ego is a bad thing, okay? And let's just begin to think that very simply that the ego is attention to form. Now, it's attention to an objective form, and from this stable reference of an objective point, your material existence is your, it's like the liftoff platform for your inner vision. So it's as if any person who dishonors the laws of the material realm, you don't, like, trust me, if you go into your inner realms, you're gonna it's as if like you gotta know where your feet are in the fog, and that means that it's like in any altered state of mind, the objectivity is stationary. You see, the mind is so fascinating. And I'm not, when I say altered state of mind, every living moment of your life is not the same state of mind. Any, like right now, my hand moved a little bit, different state of mind, guys. I'm experiencing another altered state of mind. And so for me, it's not per se kind of trying to. This was the challenge that Carl Jung had, where he was like, how can I map the inner realms of people? How can I map the unconscious when it's changing, when it's evocational? So it's, this is the hard part of exploring the unconscious. This is why I'm kind of like, we need pilots of the inner realms. And the pilots of the inner realms are creatures that are navigating, as I say, the pilots of consciousness navigate as their whole plane of existence. What does that mean? That means we want to have a relationship that even if an extraterrestrial, we want to have a relationship with life that even if an extraterrestrial civilization came down and began kind of like, what do you call it? What it is, guys, is to wonder about emptiness means to be an existential creature that is wondering what non existence is like. Because we see the values change, because there is turbulence in this plane of existence, that means whatever system, whatever way I classify life, all those classifications are actually objectively changing. So, what that means is, um, what that means, the edge of the objective world is space, the edge of matter is space, the edge of thought is experience. And experience, I definitely feel it appears as observance of space. So it's like we are being the space that our body is being in, and hence the mind attends and takes care of the body, you know. A geometrical approach to life would mean seeing it as a designer. That means no emotions. There's no story. Sometimes when I look at an idea, sometimes have been even concerned that how can I look at something with no emotion? When I was younger, I was a bit freaked out by this. I felt like to not have an emotion, what did it meant like you're not human. It's like, what is this? It's like I felt like, am I truly atoms in space without personality? And it was this kind of thing. And then I realized, no, the mind is a vehicle. Anything you don't take responsibility for, you won't understand. Anything your attention doesn't direct towards, you won't see dimensions of. The whole point of, even they said 10,000 hours for mastery. What was the point of that? The point of that was that you are doing an action and you're repeating it so much that you're eventually seeing new dimensions in it. And as you see new dimensions, your perspective changes. So it's kind of like climbing an inner mountain, where in that inner mountain, through every continuation of the ask, or like you can say, to do something for 10,000 hours means you're concentrating for 10,000 hours. Honestly, it's like the greatest weapon is not something that man can make. The greatest weapon is how attention is navigated. Attention is the most important thing. I say this: a person controls their attention, they control their life. You see this in many dimensions of life. In regards to the social cultural program, I have seen kind of like when a person's attention gets caught by something that they want, that want and desire becomes the orbit, becomes the center of your life. So if your attention is on yourself, you will get thoughts on yourself. If your attention is on anything, like if you look at a cup and if you look at it long enough, you'll see you've had a bunch of ideas on a cup. It's like they keep coming. It's as if attention in the conscious state is a beam where within that beam there's information. So the cool thing is we think we're just taking in sensory perception information and just being this, but I think it's a sort of natural cycle where it's like receive, express from both dimensions. So that means the self is receiving and expressing, and then the world is receiving and expressing. So believe it or not, when I say we're moving into the era of advanced communication, we're beginning to realize how that's the thing. That's the point of life, that if the planet is alive, it means human beings can communicate it. If the universal sector is alive, it means it can be communicated with. And ultimately, I think what's being discovered is that we're not just particles in a field of existence and activity. Do you know? We are the field, and that is the roar of the mind when it has realized it was never the mind. So you see, it's as if like if you're not willing, it's like there's always risk in life. There's always a person cannot want everything. I mean, you can choose to want everything, but I don't know where you would put everything. It's like we say a person's they have you it's like I think many people have heard like what you own ends up owning you. So it's the same with thought. It's the same with your attention remaining on a certain thought. I feel we're being ushered into a totally new relationship as creatures on this plane of existence. I feel we are beginning to realize that it's as if we are not just known bodies, we are unknown minds. This unknown mind means the potential of civilization can advance. And I feel like I'm maybe an early bird, but there's going to be a lot of very, like, so many children are going to be born in the future generations where they're going to look at this world like celestial architects, and they're going to it's like it's unavoidable. When you're in efficiency for too long, it becomes a slingshot. When you're in ignorance for too long, suddenly when you realize it has momentum, it has intensity, it has transformative intensity you know and so really it's like the good thing is now, you know if anybody listens to my talks, I think they'll get a sense of that now we can acknowledge the subjective realm and have a distance from it as us. So think of it this way: if I think I'm this bottle in front of me, I can't even move the bottle, you know what I mean? But it's kind of like in my distance from something, I can have a relationship with it, and we can say it was in the separation of this evolutionary animal in a sort of objective evolution, which led into a subjective evolution in a metamorphosis kind of way, where the end of the objective evolution was the beginning of the subjective evolution. What means the biological body got complete, it finished evolving the moment the mind came into position. When the mind came into position, it was a very strange thing. It's like, believe it or not, uh, religion sometimes has very strange metaphors, you know and this metaphor of man living in sin, right? So man living in sin means that God is telling man that, man, you messed up. The creator of the universe is looking at its creation and saying, you messed up. So now you got to be like this, right? But when we look at what's been happening, it's simply been as a sort of psychology of separating from environments of chaos and trying to go into order. you know that means if I tell you, why is language here, you know because to have it around was more efficient than not having it around. That's why technologies exist. Technologies continue and endure. Sometimes I wonder about the value of my life, and it was, I think it was last year, at the end of 2019, I had an experience that was so internally chaotic for me that I felt literally a sort of wind. Like if I was to metaphorize it, it'd be like a wind was hitting me, and everything I had held in this life was being pushed by this wind. It was as if like a kind of way where my ego turned into ashes in front of me. It was a way where I realized the only thing I have held on to in this life is how my attention is being present in the moment. And there is this intensity of the end of one's life where it is the end. So what does that mean? That means kinda it is the last performance of conscious activity. It is literally the pilot has now entered the plane of existence, the plane of life, and as the person has entered this plane of existence is navigating it, right? The attention is navigating, and that means the attention is reaching a point where it either has to evacuate from the plane of existence or it has to land the plane of existence. So if you land the plane of existence, that's the yogic Mahasamadhi approach. That means you started off as a body, but you end off as a mind, as a self-aware, conscious being, mind. I say mind to Western audiences, to Eastern audiences. I say the soul of the soul of the soul of the soul of the soul, the soul to the power of infinity. That's the kind of soul I'm talking about. Honestly, life is an activity. When we look at trees, some people in the world consider them alive. I am one of those people. I know some people, are saying shame, shame, shame. But for me, it's not just the tree that is alive. Because my mind is my whole moment, the whole world is alive. I have no choice. The energy of the attention, it kind of like what your attention permeates. reality. And if your attention it has a focal point of a characteristic, that characteristic echoes, you know. So that means the way people's minds are working is that they're looking at others and they're actually wondering about different versions of themselves. And really, when you look at reality, like in my own life, people I've been inspired to suddenly, like, I remember I would listen to a lot of talks online, and for example, coming across Alan Watts lectures, Papa G's lectures. Sorry, guys, there's a, just hang on. Sorry about that, guys. Had to answer an unavoidable phone call. So, anyways, um, uh, presence of attention ultimately is the point. Pre-emptiness. Something I have to say. I have a memory, one of my earliest memories, where in that early memory, there was no subjective content. I was literally just in a room and sight in a room. My earliest memory, I'm not even a person in it. I'm just sight in a room. And that sight, how can I tell you? It is experientially accessible to me, as if when I remember that moment, I am that moment, as if my mind witnessed that experience and has retained it, you know? And that was an experience, I say, pre-language, pre-thought. That was, it was as if I was conscious of a moment of my own being where I had not been formulated into a thought yet, you know. So there is intelligence beyond linguistic interpretation, by the way. They're like, language is a simulation. I say it, I have to emphasize it, that it's a technology. We are not language, the same way we're not video games when we play them, you know. It's there's a separation. There's a separation of what is and what appears. So that was a pre-thought moment. And when I was thinking about existence, it was pre-emptiness. So it's either like man can never see emptiness, or when he sees it, there is no man to see it. There's nothing. So I find it kind of fascinating. We are designed as creatures to learn from the highs and lows of life, you know. When you're younger, your material existence, your objective self is active and should be active, you know. When you get older, you live life more as a mind. For me, this may even sound a bit chaotic, but if we kind of have a Heraclitus's kind of viewpoint, philosophical kind of outlook, really, how can you judge the self? How can you have a comment on being? Do you see the mystical kind of angle of it? It's like when you enter silence, there's no questions to ask, there's no answer to be given. It's just the nullification of the self conditioned ignorance. That means you believe that you're a belief, but the leaves on the tree change as the seasons pass, and beliefs change, beliefs change. This talk kind of feels to me like the idea of preemptiness kind of feels like I gave a talk years ago. It was like above the, which means to consider higher dimensional space or be in the void until we revert back to our past pattern of recognition. I think really what it is it becomes to instantaneous awareness. So what that means is if we go back to the word the like if there's we look at the word self-awareness and we see there's the self part that has design and shape, and then there's the awareness part that is aware of the shape and design, you know. So when we look at the concept of a kind of self and awareness, I'm kind of telling people that we have been conditioned to first think the self is an object, then to think it's a subject, and only to move beyond it. Do you know that means it's like the same way we were worshiping idols, we're still worshiping our body as us, are we not? So it's kind of like it's a process of stepping out of a multidimensional self worship, where in one dimension yourself is everything, in another dimension yourself is a fragment. It's like you can identify with your whole body right now, or you can identify with a cell in your body. You know, the mind is so able that it knows why it's here. It knows the freedom it has. It's just the archetype sometimes doesn't provide the internal authorization. For me, it's not that people like this whole mentality of testing intelligence. It felt ridiculous to me when I realized intelligence is dynamic, so it can't be tested. It's like too moving. It's too alive, you know. It's too dynamic. So if intelligence has a dynamic relationship, it means that that sort of intelligence has to do per se with navigation rather than memorization. So right now the educational systems are kind of treating the children of their students as kind of, what do you call it, as soldiers. All right, soldier, you got to be here. You got you got to do this, and this is your task, and this is your mission, and work hard, and the empire will reward you. You know, and the soldier's like, okay, I fucking like given a huge life saving for this to be a soldier in this system. So let me go and be the best soldier I can be. And the soldier blind goes into a system, not realizing we are 8 billion unique eyes with different DNA. And does it make sense one educational system fits all? No, it means ultimately all those things that are acting as governing powers will become resource stations. I have this theory that an an advanced civilization is a civilization that is conscious of the light in its eyes. We have been looking for truth too long, both in the outer realms and the inner realms. And it's as if it's like a battle and this war that's been going on, and suddenly there's been a shout, the war is over, the war is over. And people are like, is the war over? And they start that kind of feeling the war is over, the war is over. And suddenly halfway they realize, no, some random dude shouted the war is over so he doesn't get attacked. I'm definitely gonna make a movie about that, you know? That warrior who was stuck in a battlefield, and he's like, I don't know, but I'm definitely gonna die in like, I don't know, 30 seconds. What's the strategy? It's like, just give a message. He's like, the war is over, the war is over. And people are kind of slowing down their fighting, and they're like, the war is over. Maybe it is. Maybe we don't have to be enemies no more. And then the general comes, no, it's not over. Who is this guy? Oh, man. Ah, it's all piloting the attention and pretty much being chill about it as a human being. That means your eyes have opened in an existential condition. Some factors of it, they're unconditional. They are the way they are. Some factors, you as you're the most evolutionary creature on this planet, you have that update. You have an ability to engage and interact with your world in such a complex way. You know, guys, I've pretty much I think hit the um, flown this talk to where I wanted. You know, pre-emptiness. Silence is the bearer of that secret. But what is in silence is no personality can enter beyond silence. There's a silence is strangely where your intelligence and ability and observance of noise appears. That means any person who's incredibly comfortable with the silence, you will be an incredible listener in this world. You know, you will be such an incredible listener that you will even hear how the winds of this world have a voice to them. How nature is not mute. Oh, as some guy said, man is deaf. The reason, I mean, man is not deaf. It's just he's decided not to listen because the environment has become part of his responsibility. So what that means is we have to hold high the banner of the free will. We have to celebrate the nature of our design. And before the world becomes a weird technological place, and not weird in a bad way, just a new kind of technological arena enters, cyberspace culture begins being pioneered properly, like in application. So it's kind of like the environment is a part of your thinking that you cannot escape, really. So you can internally at least find separation from it. It's this is the difference between outer strength and inner strength. Outer strength has to do with how much you can break through the barriers, you know. But inner strength has to do with how much when life breaks you, you stand. You can keep standing. And the standing is simple. Sometimes people can go through a chaotic experience, but with a single emotion, just instantly acknowledge what happened and move on. It's as if it's like, here's the thing. Any person, it's like suffering is not worth holding on to. Suffering is like holding on to a burning stick. As it's burning your hands and turning into ash, you know, it's like, you know, I think wonder is something that wonder beyond dimensional framework is something very unique to the human being. And here's the thing, by the future disconnected us with how the present already knew where it was going. And this may be surprising to people, but I'll tell you one thing that has really helped me in regards to I could tell you communicating these talks was not by thinking of something complex, but was about acknowledging the environment in the simplest way. It's kind of like entering a room, and rather than suddenly seeing the most complex things in the room, your mind instantly is scanning in the simplest way how it's identifying patterns. You know, so I'll tell you an example. For example, in the movie Limitless, the dude takes that pill and suddenly sees like the title of a book in a purse and suddenly remembers all the pages of his mind subconsciously was exposed to in a book where he read it a while back, and suddenly his intelligence had access to that content. My Mr. Within's kind of suggestion on how that would be kind of attempt, how we can make an attempt to do that without the pill, would actually be the kind of bringing the way we have given the world a complex and wondering about how its simpler building blocks. So pretty much you can say um, secular culture is being drawn towards the more complex vision of the life, and you can say non-secular is choosing to remain simple. You know, so it's as if there are different there are different designs of ships, different kinds of ship like people who, for example, give themselves an identity of like, I mean, I don't know. I come from a school of thought where I like you can't be language. Even I have a name right now, I require that to be an individual to others. But really, am I the name? Am I the thought? Am I the idea I have in one moment when I can have endless ideas? So I see I am not defined by the content. I'm not defined by what my mind produces. So what is left there? And that's where I'm saying that's when experience takes over. That means all personalities, all archetypes, you pretty much begin becoming like a field of intelligence in the moment, and everything in the moment is abiding by that field. Now, I'm not saying this is something you're doing consciously, because it has to do with the transformation of vision beyond the edges of the conscious archetype, how you see yourself as a self. So it's as if like something I'm saying, and I don't know, it may make some people frown, but if you look at a frown upside down, it's a smile too. If that person frowning did a backflip, that midway point in the air, they're actually smiling. You know? Regardless of the arc of the narrative, vision lives on. Vision has unknown aspects. If life was a formula, mathematical formula, it would be the unknown x variable would be the soul, aka how consciousness is here. And it's kind of like, I think it's a very healthy way that, for example, when you see a person, when you see another person, like any human being you see, this is something I wonder, and it's not out of like something a person should be always doing, but I'm just saying, like, when I see a person, I wonder how many rooms are they standing in this moment. For example, when you talk to someone and you see they're not listening, I say, okay, this person is attention is to an inner room. His attention is to his inner realms, right? So the person is, regardless of what I say, it's as if like he's not even here. His attention is in the inner. When a teacher begins talking in the classroom and the attention of some students are on the whiteboard or the chalkboard, and some students are kind of like are looking at their phone, or they're looking at like they've closed their eyes and are daydreaming or something. The reason is because their natural approach to the content felt unacknowledged. So when the child feels its mind, the professor doesn't care about its mind when it's the only one talking, the child automatically gives it an authorization to be somewhere else. So it's kind of in human psychology. You tell someone to do something and they'll be like, yo, if I do it, then I'm listening to this guy, so I'm not going to do it, so I listen to myself. Anyways, guys, honestly, I gotta leave right now, but I'll tell you this: preemptiness It is unknown potential, and from unknown potential comes various probabilities of design, right? So it's as if like I remember reading it in a quote from the previous talk I was giving, like in the quote tunnel, where it was a quote from some guy that he said like it's like you have reality, then there is imagination as a response to this reality, then what you have imagined, that means what you have seen plus the content of your subjective realms, then the decision comes. So the free will looks at the subjective realm, and the objective realm then decides. If your free will doesn't look at your subjective realm, it means you're like reacting an animal. You know, you're like in your animal instincts. You don't need to be conscious of the environment. You're just energetic unconscious movement, which is savage, right? The whole point of civilization is that we became civil. The whole point of being civil was in some sense kind of like our attention choosing to re-administer the values that were once held by nature, and we brought it in our own hands. Yeah. So anyways, guys, I gotta head out. Much blessings. Thanks for listening, and I guess I'll say this. Um, what does preemptiness mean to you? Share it in the comment section. Much blessings and namaste.